I'm one of the masters of the Arctic. Our Eskimo people had mastered the way of living for thousands of years.
Now the oil industry comes up here and look for oil out in the ocean.
You can't fight the Arctic Ocean.
There's going to be a spill.
Who's going to clean it up once it gets up here?
You think they're prepared to clean up in the Arctic Ocean?
Do you have a plan?
I've never got any answers on that.
Until there's another economic base for our region, we are dependent on it.
Where am I going to get the money for gas?
The villages are in a very precarious position.
We cannot live up here without the food from our ocean. It's not oil that's going to feed us.
One, two, three, get it! Stand guard!
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Nunavut.
Every June, coastal Arctic communities celebrate the whale harvest, and each successful whaling crew distributes shares of their bounty.
And so I've grown up going out whaling with our crew, and I've gone out fall whaling and spring whaling, and it's whaling is something that really brings our family together. You know, whether it's the preparing, the actual hunt, or the celebration, and all the hard work around whaling, it really brings our family closer together. And it's one of the most beautiful things if you ever have a chance to go out onto the ice and be out there at the open lead, watching the whales jump around and play. It's one of the most beautiful things. And then just even being in the boat, whether it's spring or fall whaling, on the chase of the whale, it's just like you get an adrenaline that you don't get doing anything else. And it's just a very spiritual and beautiful thing that I think we're blessed as Inupiaq people to do.
I'm one of the masters of the Arctic. Our Eskimo people had mastered the way of living for thousands of years, so I'm one of the masters that learned how to survive in the Arctic. As a young man, hunger was never far away. If you wanted to survive, you had to have a dog team. It was a struggle for us to have dog team, because every time I go hunting, I have to hunt for my family and the dogs. The dogs ate better than I did, because they're the ones that make us survive. So we have to live without, we have to live alongside them.
I had 2 kids at the time. It'd take all day long to give them a bath. I should have to go chop the ice, bring the ice in, and get a fire going, melt the fire, and put them in a bucket. It was rough, really rough.
And then I had a whole battery of questions from my mom about, why aren't we still doing this the way they used to? Why has this practice changed, And she said, well, what would you have us do? She looked at me and she kind of threw down. What would you have us do? Wear only skin clothing and use only stone tools and live with a very short lifespan, face the prospects of starvation in our communities? Is that really the lifestyle that you want to go back to?
Today, for the most part, the villages have electricity and running water. And although they rely on maritime harvesting, hunting, and fishing, a full menu of food items is available, though it is expensive.
I don't know what all over here. 42. We want to thank all of the BP, Shell, and Exxon Mobil for providing all the apples and oranges, and they're giving us a count now. So we're about ready to distribute them.
It's amazing at the progress we've made. When I think back at my mother's generation and my grandmother's generation, my grandmother went from having never seen anyone speak English, no Westernization at all, and then my mother being shipped off to boarding school, things like that. It's just an amazing thing.
I was sitting there when the guy came in and called on the phone and said they discovered oil. And he took us up to the bar and bought us all beer.
Since the first discovery of oil in 1968, Atlantic Richfield Company's operating area at Prudhoe Bay has been the scene of an ongoing adventure. Oil men and their rigs are part of a massive operation designed to tap some 10 billion barrels of oil locked in a natural reservoir beneath the Arctic tundra.
The U.S. purchase of Alaska from Russia ignored the claims of Alaska natives who had lived on the land for over 10,000 years and claimed ownership over vast territories, much of which included the oil grounds and pipeline transit routes.
We were fighting so hard for the land that the oil was on. It was the land that we had always lived on. And when we found out that we weren't going to be able to own the land, we had some leaders that fought for Inupiaq self-determination to make sure that everything was in place to where that we would seek, have some benefit from the oil development.
Land claims were settled in 1971. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act established 12 regional Alaska Native corporations, and it established municipal governments.
And with the creation of the North Slope Borough back in the early 70s, we were able to have taxing and zoning laws that we were able to put upon the oil companies.
Now, Alaska natives manage the revenue from oil and land use, dramatically transforming these communities, bringing in water, electricity, snow machines, schools, public buildings, healthcare, and heating.
Moving from the dog team to the snow machine was a big change. You got there a lot faster. And that brought us to where am I going to get the money for gas?
Moving from a subsistence economy into a cash economy hasn't been an easy one. The villages in Alaska are in a very precarious position.
It's been a challenge to balance out these two different kind of ways of lives and mesh them together. A lot of people look at development as a bad thing. There's a lot that look at it as a good thing. I think we just need to have a critical eye on it and monitor where it's going and what it can do for our communities.
I told the oil companies, I said, I don't want to look out this window here and see an oil well. And I don't want to look out that window and see an oil well. But I don't want to go back to pre-oil. Because it was rough, really rough.
With oil revenue declining at Prudhoe Bay, we are still faced with this challenge. Things can change. With no more oil development, things can change dramatically.
And now we're looking at a pipeline, the umbilical cord that connects us to the rest of the world as being in jeopardy, transmitting a volume of oil that's so low that we start to run into engineering problems. And so the answer is it needs more throughput. It needs more volume. We need more oil discoveries to keep this lifeline open.
And we'll drill for the billions of barrels of oil that we have right now warehoused underground, including our resources offshore. We will drill here and drill now, and now's when you chant, drill, baby, drill. Yes. Drill, baby, drill.
Last year, America's oil production reached its highest level since 2003, but I believe that we should continue to expand oil production in America. To do this, I'm directing the Department of Interior to conduct annual lease sales in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve, as well as certain areas off the coast of Alaska.
The oil giant Shell is on its way to the Arctic, but not before a final showdown with environmental activists in kayaks. On Tuesday, dozens of kayaktivists were arrested after paddling up to a Shell drilling rig and preventing it from leaving the port of Seattle. Several dozen supporters.
Currently, oil drilling is in the Prudhoe Bay Area, but future development may occur in oil lease areas offshore as well as within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
You know, they don't want offshore drilling, but they didn't want, to begin with, they didn't want ANWR drilling. Then when they were pushing for offshore, they said, well, no offshore, do onshore.
Me, I'm opposed to offshore drilling, 100%. I don't want them out there. I don't want, no, because that's going to impact our whaling, and that's a big thing in our community, whaling. Not only that, we have the seals to watch out for the polar bears and fish and everything, and if one oil spill out here is going to destroy everything.
We see black clouds coming from Prudhoe Bay. We're 130 miles away, so if that's happening right now, and then you add on to that with the additional development, you know, it's going to affect our air quality. It's my concern.
You know, development has been beneficial in some ways and has taken away in some ways. You know, some people were, as we were boating by, they're like, oh, that's such an eyesore. But it's that same development that helps fund the borough.
That's where the money comes from, to do all this stuff, all the schools and the houses.
So if we lack the only industry in our area that has foisted these improvements, we're hurting. And the only industry that has done that for us, we have admitted, is the oil and gas industry. And until there's another economic base for our region, we are dependent on it. And we have to recognize it, and we have to remember that when we're thinking about what kind of community will our grandchildren have.
No, I don't know. I think we did just fine without the oil industry for several thousand years before they showed up. You know, we don't have to drill for oil forever to create an economy.
For many years, I fought the industry. You can't do this, you can't do that. Then I find out what was the problem. The industry didn't know. Every time they did something, they make a mistake. I changed my tactics. Even though I don't like development, I noticed if I don't tell them, they're going to keep making mistakes, make some drastic oil spills. So I was an oil spill responder for 15 years, you know, and I did most of the major cleanups over there, but we had to teach them how to do this and that in the coal.
I worked in Prudhoe Bay. I've cleaned up over there, and I've shoveled up a lot of oil off of gravel going down that deep. We had sometimes had to go that deep, just gravel soaked with oil underneath those rigs. I just don't want to see that around here. I've seen ponds with latrines of oil, and I've heard horror stories of caribous with deformed babies and that, and they keep saying, oh, it's all safe, it's all safe. Well, yeah, it's all safe, but I also cleaned that stuff up that you guys said is all safe, and I've seen the impact, and it's all contained in Prudhoe, but I just don't want that around here. It's going to hurt our culture and everything, our land use and everything.
The world's worst oil pollution accident started on Saturday, March the 24th, 1989. The 1,000-foot supertanker Exxon Valdez ran aground on a reef in Prince William Sound in Alaska. Within hours, 11 million gallons of crude oil had leaked into the sea, spreading.
If they have an oil spill, how are they going to clean it up? There's no studies that they've done, and that just proves that they can clean it up off the ice or underneath the ice or in the water.
But there's concerns that those of us that live there and see that ice, you say, how can they possibly do anything there? And they're not coming up with answers. They do not have the answers, nobody. I've asked if there's been any studies on how long the oil will be toxic in the Arctic Ocean. I've never got any answers on that. You know, you might have 50 years where you don't have a spill, who knows? But there's going to be a spill.
2002, I helped an oil spill responder vessel out of Prudhoe Bay for practice run, a drill. I took it out to the ocean. We took it out to the ocean to where there's a lot of ice. The Arctic Endeavour, the Arctic oil spill responder, failed. You know what stopped the Arctic Endeavour, if we ever to use it in the Arctic Ocean for cleanup? Slush ice, the little trinkle of snow about this much. It plugged every little hole there was in there. It was not the big ice. There's always slush ice by the iceberg, but that's what stopped all the equipment, the fancy $1 million equipment. That's what stopped it. Real fine snow that was on top of the thing. You think they're prepared to clean up in the Arctic Ocean? No.
There'll be statements made that every effort will be made to not have it happen, but it eventually will happen, and it cannot be cleaned up, and we don't know what kind of effects it would have on the marine life. It's definitely not going to be a positive effect. It would only be negative. It could kill the whales. They swim through the ocean with their mouth open to catch the food, and there's oil in that water. What are the effects? You know, it's to me to think that that's acceptable and lose a season of whaling. No, I don't think that. I think it could be gone forever. We're pretty lucky we still have whales.
When I was a kid, I used to go out hunting with my uncle. Every time they go out, I go out hunting. I always go. I always ask them, they let me go. But one day he said, "Charlie, you're going to stay home today." I cried to go out. They left me on the beach. That's the last of I seen of them. They never returned. I became an oil spill responder. I tend to keep the Arctic Ocean clean. Because my two uncles are out there.
Our culture depends on a clean ocean, clean environment, and that's what we want. We're going to be doing all we can to ensure that.
I don't think we can solely live on subsistence. I don't think there's a way that we can live without it.
I can see, that we need to move on, and the economy needs it, but this is our home, and it's going to impact us the most. And
we've had to overcome so many obstacles in such a short period of time.
If that is our history, if that's our heritage of elegant solutions to tough problems, then let it continue today.
We survived the last 100 years. We're good for another 100.
When I went Cocktoog to be, the same. That's when I was in 1975, when there was just a small little village here and not a care in the world.